Fong Bui joins us from New York City. Fong is an artist, writer, independent curator, publisher, and artistic director of the Brooklyn Rail, the River Rail, Rail Editions, and Rail Curatorial projects. He recently served as curatorial advisor at MoMA PS1. Fong is also a very special honoree, as he is an UArts alum, class of '85 illustration. Fong, we are so glad you've joined us today. Let's first learn a bit more about Fong. Take a look.
We thought of curators, and one of the first people we thought of was Fong Bui, who we admired. We thought that if anybody could do a really great version of a show like this, it would be Fong.
Fong is an artist, writer, and curator, as well as the artistic director and founder of the Brooklyn Rail, a journal devoted to art, culture, and politics.
From the very beginning of time, starting with cavemen of the old Stone Age, sort of tail end at the Ice Age, which spanned, I think, 125,000 years to the present. Human beings have always had this great desire to comprehend, to mediate the two different worlds, the visible world and the invisible world. Just as much as we're trying to figure out a way to understand that thrive between the Cartesian space, between mind-body predicament. As an immigrant coming to America and learning about the culture, and I realized America is a pendulum swing in its political extremity. It's like two cowboys shooting at the OK Corral. You know, either you do or die, or you win or you lose. You know, everything is so black and white. So every decade, it seems to me that just made in order to repudiate the previous one.
Fong Bui, it gives me great pleasure to proceed with the conferral of your degree in remote hooding. By virtue of the authority delegated to me by the Board of Trustees of the University of the Arts, from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I hereby confer upon Fong Bui the degree of Doctor of Fine Arts, honoris causa, with all the rights and privileges pertaining thereto. Congratulations, Dr. Bui.
Thank you, President David Yeager. What a pleasure. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. Good morning, mentors and students. Good morning, proud fathers and proud mothers. Good morning to us all. I feel so tremendously honored to have this opportunity to share with you all how truly I feel about the immense importance of the role and the function of the arts and the humanities play in our society, especially right now, more than ever in any previous history, at least in our collective memory. This is to say there's a role, a function that only artists can play that no others can. The function or the role of the arts and the humanities have always been about asking the questions, never providing the answer, never about the answer. And one of the questions we often ask is, what is an artist? What is a writer, a poet, a musician, a dancer? How would we describe the person who trusts and follow his, her, or their creative impulses, their calling? How can we describe, I'm switching now to the plural, the role and the function of artists and who they really are? The answer is simple, but also quite intensely complex. Artists are persons, individuals who live by their imagination and who learn about themselves and their surrounding environment, natural or man-made, through self-discovery, in the act of making, in the act of creating. The very act of making, creating usually implies the unknown space of nothingness from which a work of art, a poem, a piece of music, and so on is being made, get made, being created, get created. Artists are like children who don't censor their excitement, enthusiasm, therefore their vision. I think Baudelaire was right when he said, artists are the ones who can recover childhood, their childhood at will. The great art historian, the late Maya Shapiro, once told me a profound story that describes best, I think, what I'm trying to convey to you now. There was a king with one eye. To replace the missing eye, the king searched across the land and found a renowned magician whom he commissioned to craft him an artificial eye. When it was complete, no one in the kingdom could tell the difference between the real and the artificial eye. One day, a murderer was brought before the king to be either pardoned or put to death. The king told this murderer of his artificial eye and his perfection, how no one in the court, the whole kingdom could tell the difference whatsoever. He said, now, if you can tell me which eye of mine is real, I will pardon you. Without a blink and barely a glance, the murderer responded immediately, your right eye is the real eye, your majesty. The king, so impressed by the murderer, quick replied, and he said, you are right, but how did you know? The murderer answered, I know, because that one, the right one, has a glint of mercy in it. At any rate, when President David Yeager came for a brunch at my home in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, it was on Saturday, March 8th, exactly 11 a.m. as intended, which impressed me immensely because I've always appreciated those who show respect for time, hence a similar respect for punctuality. But in talking to President Yeager for the next 4+ hours about various topics, especially in the beginning of our own Georgian epiphany, you know, the kind of epiphany that associates with the evanescent moment, the sudden spiritual manifestation that would usually happen when you are least expecting it. And it does happen to us all. We, for some reason, don't always trust it, nor embrace it. And when we do, it sets us forward into a perpetual journey of self, or so-called endless self-discovery. It never ends. We also spoke of what I do with the Brooklyn Rail, and it turned out that we have so many things in common. For example, in the first place, we both admire John Dewey's philosophy of pragmatism. We love this idea of participatory democracy as an extension of Walt Whitman's democratic vista, where the role and the function of the arts and humanities is essential to the growth of our fellow human beings. We both believe in democratic learning, learning by doing, learning as an indispensable experience of how things are made, get made. Hence, there should never be a division between academic learning and vocational learning, for they both sides, they are the two sides of the same process. Then we spoke, as I remember, inevitably of Black Mountain College, one of the most inspiring and experimental pedagogy ever attempted, at least in this country, given the fact that it was founded in Asheville, North Carolina. I've been there a few times, not exactly the most cosmopolitan place you can imagine. And the fact that it only lasts for 24 years, from 1933 to 1957. It had a significant impact, however, on our cultural life, where cross-pollination among the and between various disciplines were being nurtured. The philosophy of Black Mountain College had roots in John Dewey's philosophy of pragmatism, transpires especially through his principle of progressive education, which advocated for democratic learning by doing, as I mentioned earlier, while underlining the importance of context in that each learning individual brings a specific attribute and history to the community. That's very important. In other words, the very idea of learning from others that are unlike you is the very essence of democracy. This so-called dialectical process is a perpetual condition that lies between thinking and feeling, imagining and making whatever the potential synthesis of the two or more opposing viewpoints was in fact Dewey's hard-won unity. In that he was able to successfully bring both Hegel historicism and Darwin naturalism together and make it work, insofar that we ourselves are willing to constantly cultivate and nurture the fragility of our democracy. I admire the concept of our community being like a symphony in which each instrument has its own specific and unique musical sound, unlike others, yet it adds to the harmony of the total sound of the symphony, symphonically speaking. As I am talking to you now, from my home to your home, I can feel, as we all can feel, a profound desire to be together. This desire of being together is a form of solidarity, hence socially close, not socially distancing. And we have recently learned to acknowledge being mere products of one-dimensional presentation of ourselves. Our functions in society has been a political device that keeps us apart from one another, let alone our growth as human beings. This is the first time in our lifetime we've been forced by nature to be slowed down. So why the whole world is being slowed down by COVID-19? Nature is taking her time to heal her body from humanity's aggressive abuse for far too long. We, the artists, the writers, the poets, the dancers, the musicians, the filmmakers, among other artistic performers and producers, recognize this unreal yet so real, so strange yet so familiar situation as a profound opportunity for long-awaited self-contemplation about our individual lives, again, in relationship to each other. I talked about that just now. And to the precarious balance between our man-made environment and our natural world. Being forced to slow down corresponds to the slowness of time, which is required yet natural condition to our beautiful tradition of humanistic inquiry. Slowness is what it takes to make a painting, a sculpture. Slowness is absolutely required to write or to read a poem, to compose or to listen a piece of music. Slowness is a true respect for time, a duration of time that is necessary to make or to view a work of art. These are our facts. In most languages, we shouldn't forget this. If not all, I would say, the word fact means the product of labor. This is our time, a time for us to collectively mobilize slowness in the works of arts, the works of the arts and the humanities. In that in turn for sure become an antidote to the present toxic deployment of speed. Now is our time to amplify the beauty of any work of art against any form of oppression, manipulation, and above all, vulgarity. As we all remember how the Renaissance had managed to transform from darkness to light, from dark ages, from the very dark ages that we learn, associated with savage war, ignorant famine, and pandemic such as the Black Death, to the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. It was in Professor Nancy Davenport art history class I took here in 1981 that I learned about the Black Death that struck the city of Florence and took 65% of its population, including all the life, the art that we love and admire. It was in Professor Stephen Bird poetry class that I took that I learned about the Decameron, for example, written by Giovanni Boccaccio during the time of Black Death, which had a significant influence on Chaucer when he wrote his Canterbury Tales during the major plague outbreak in England. I had eventually learned about the idea of cross-pollination between the sciences, the arts, and humanities. They all were established during the Renaissance and were meant for us to carry on as fragile as our current humanistic tradition. That's not dissimilar to our fragility, the fragility of democracy. We must learn how to work together, to learn from each other, to cross-pollinate as we must work hard to maintain, never surrender to any seductive dogma of one-dimensionality or pigeonhole specialization. Our democracy is a self-correcting democracy. Let's treasure it through our love for the arts and humanities. I'm therefore dedicating this occasion to Professor Nancy Davenport, Professor Stephen Bird, Professor Jane Piper, Professor Stephen Tarrantell, Professor Jonathan Feinberg, who is a friend, good friend, who is an editor-at-large at the Brooklyn Rail, who really knows why we keep the Brooklyn Rail free, why it must stay free, why it must connect the wisdom of the older generation in the arts and humanities to the sparkling, ready-to-go energy of the younger generation. So both can give back to the working class. As again, John Dewey once said, Americans don't want to think, they want to know. I remember talking to Noam Chomsky, who said, I was born in 1928 in a very poor Jewish family in Philadelphia. It was indeed during the Great Depression. Therefore, we, like most people, were barely getting by, but we were very educated. We went to poetry reading, we went to see play, on occasion cinema, when cinema was an art form that was created to reach common people and to bring out, inspire their humanity, not to spoon feed them. As we all know, the arts and humanities play a huge role during the Great Depression. The WPA, we heard of that, Work Progress Administration, for example. I love the idea of the Federal Project One, which have 5 different parts: the Federal Art Project, the Federal Music Project, the Federal Theater Project, the Federal Writers Project, and Historical Survey, Record Survey, the Historical Record Survey. Not to mention relief for African American and about 15% of the household heads on relief were women and youth programs. It is time for us, the creative individuals, any of us who claim to belong to the culture of intelligentsia, a culture of artistic bohemia, it is time for us to give back, to create an ongoing dialogue so working class Americans don't feel they've been neglected, betrayed, as they do at the moment. I would like to also dedicate this occasion to my new friend and comrade in arms, President David Yeager. But above all, this is the dedication to all of you, to whom art is a way of life. So thank you, good luck, and congratulations.
Thank you, Fong, for your truly inspiring words for the graduates of 2020.